In honor of the worst JoJo meme Araki forgot, I am going to be talking about some of the biggest misconceptions about JoJo's Bizarre Adventures. Here we go. JoJo is a really old manga, and when we think about it, it's so old that all of the misconceptions that come from the manga are mostly assumptions. So we only are gonna go through the most popular ones and debunk them in an easy way for anyone to understand. When I said we, it's because this is a collaboration with Alt-Narancia, who is a member of the community and a friend of mine. His channel should be in the description below. Since this is my video, I will start with the first one. Dio Brando is one of the most polarizing figures in JoJo's Bizarre Adventures, and so he's one of the most powerful. Through the series he has gotten a lot of power-ups, a lot of downgrades, and interestingly enough his character has went through the most transformations in terms of powers and how Araki wanted to perceive his powers as a villain, and the two big parts he was the main villain on. But one of the biggest misconceptions in JoJo's Bizarre Adventures come when part 3 Dio actually fights, and when he does he only uses the stand power. His vampire powers were used to the minimal use, so only flying and some other cool stuff, but that was only minimal use to what we seen in part 1. While in part 1 he could have easily used his frozen thing and use his ice power when he can just freeze anyone, use his laser from his eyes and really crazy stuff to a point where he can even turn human to animal, and that was cool enough, but he doesn't do that in part 3. So why? Remember when Jonathan died and Dio only as a head took Jonathan's body, which is a human, not a vampire, and as you can know, a body takes like 90% of your entirety and the head is like not even 10% entirely. So not only Dio isn't a full vampire, but he isn't even a half vampire. He's less vampiric than most vampires. He is the least vampire being ever. So I think that if he did use those powers wouldn't make sense, because if he did use those powers, then how did he have those powers when he's literally not even a vampire and he needed a lot more to become that vampire? Because most of part 3 was so Dio can suck Joestar blood to regain the vampirism he had once in a while. So I think this makes sense a lot more, and believe me, if Dio used those powers in part 3, these people who are calling this a plot hole are the same people who would have called that a plot hole. Hypocrisy. Okay, so the next one will be explained by Alt-Narancia, so I will leave it to him.
Hey guys, it's Narancia. One thing many people seem to not understand about part 4 is the reason why Joseph did not use Hermit Purple to find Kira. The first thing you gotta remember is that Joseph is really old. Stands tend to become a lot weaker with age since the abilities are directly connected to the user. Then why was Joseph called in the first place? They tried to use Hermit Purple to follow Akira's stand through the electric current. It seems to be a lot easier than using spirit photography. We already knew that Joseph struggled with this ability. When he tried to get a photograph of Josuke, his signal was disturbed by Angelo. Since there were a bunch of stand users in Wario at the time, it would seem like spirit photography isn't really an option to find Kira.
Remember Holly's stand, the mother of JOTARO, the granddaughter of Joseph? Well, the part 3 plot was basically pushed by her, because she was the reason why everyone went to Egypt in the first place to fight Dio, because she couldn't control her stand. Well, there are a lot of people asking how are the characters in the next part or that part that are literally animals, high school students that can control their stands but Holly cannot? Good question, Ame, and a better answer, I say. Well, it's explained that stands come from the fighting spirit, which is actually mentioned about 1,000 times or so in the anime and the manga. So what does this really mean? It means that a stand is awoken by your fighting spirit. Sure, everyone in part 3 kinda looks like a buff dude, but a lot of people misconcept this. You don't need to be physically strong to control your stand. You need to be spiritually strong to control your stand. You need a high will to fight, a high will to defend something, a will to do something, a will to gain something, or even better than all of those. Just the will to live. And every character in JoJo's Bizarre Adventures with a stand has that, had that, or will have that. And that's how it goes. So when you see Jotaro, Polnareff, Avdol, and Joseph with a stand, you can say, look at these muscular dudes, 190 centimeters. You don't need to be like them for a stand, because Araki took the writing into a human standpoint. That's why a high school student like Koichi, a dog like Iggy can have a stand. And that is why JoJo's Bizarre Adventures power system works in the first place. Holly doesn't have that fighting spirit. She's just a woman who does her daily work, just a free spirit woman. Nothing too complex about that. So I think it makes a lot of sense why she can't use her stand properly. A lot of it.
Another famous misconception regarding Part 4 is that many people think that it makes no sense for Rohan to not be reliant on drawings after his initial fight. But in fact, it is very common for stands in JoJo to develop or get stronger. It was even mentioned that Rohan improved his ability after his first encounter with the Morio warriors. And his ability didn't really lose its connection to drawings. When Rohan uses his stand, he draws the outlines of Pink Dark Boy in the air to summon Heaven's Door. That's why his stand looks like Pink Dark Boy in the first place. So it kind of still works the same way as before, it's just a lot more reliable. Now he doesn't depend on people looking at pages of his manga to activate his ability. We saw a similar thing happening to JoJolion. Early on in Part 6, she couldn't summon the humanoid representation of her stand either. She could only use strings. She had to develop it, just like Rohan. It even works in a similar way. To summon her humanoid appearing stone free, she creates a 3D image with strings. Kind of like a 3D printer. So you could say Rohan's ability works in the same way, or at least in a similar way.
This next one is probably the hardest one and the most complex one, and it's the scene when Josuke in a flashback gets saved by a mysterious man. Who was this man? Well, many theories that aren't 100% confirmed, but they make a lot of sense say that this man was Josuke that saves himself. It was set up to be part of the Bites the Dust arc when Kira can go back in time. Now let me explain this one. It probably was. Let's say it was. Even though it's not 100% confirmed, let's say it was, because the similarities are there, everything is there. Now, that's not a plot hole. There will never be a plot hole, because Araki just didn't win with that. In fact, it makes a lot better sense with that, because Kira's Bites the Dust is 1 day, so Kira can go back 1 day. Or let's say that he can go even more than that, or whatever you want to say with Bites the Dust, or whatever Araki had planned with Bites the Dust, he just didn't go with that. That's not a plot hole, because a man saving Josuke, and we never know who the man is, plays up to one of the 4 most important things that Araki writes about, and that one is mystery. If you ever have read JoJo's Bizarre Adventures, which I'm sure all of you have, you should know that Araki likes mystery. Every single JoJo's Bizarre Adventures arc has a mystery themed on it, and those who don't have probably a mystery character in it. And this is JoJo's Bizarre Adventures Diamond is Unbreakable. One of the mysteries, this man who saved Josuke, gave Josuke motivation, but we never know about him. In a writing concept, it's not a plot hole, it's just an unexplored thing that Araki wanted to leave there. Now, whenever Araki wanted to plan or not, doesn't really matter. It just means that creative minds can leave a lot of stuff behind. It doesn't mean that Araki forgot about it. But if you think that Araki forgot about it, you're using headcanon. You're probably wrong.
More Part 4 stuff, woohoo! Seems like DIO is a bit confusing to a lot of people. Remember when Jotaro got beaten by a rat? Well, is it really that easy? Talking about power scaling in JoJo is a bit hard, since it is all very much dependent on matchup and situation. When Jotaro first encountered RATT, he got hit because he was curious about its ability. Not only that, but he was probably ambushed. His curiosity could have been his downfall, if Josuke wasn't there to save him. This was done to show the differences between Jotaro and Josuke. They are not the same person, and Araki tried to establish Josuke as the main JoJo of the part. Jotaro isn't meant to be an almighty trump card Josuke can just rely on. The second encounter with the rat also had more of a symbolic meaning. Jotaro could have probably easily just shot RATT with Star Platinum's power and precision, just like Josuke did. But he let Josuke do it because Jotaro had more of a teacher role. He didn't just want to get rid of the RATT, he wanted to prepare Josuke for the future, so he can protect Mario. The RATT fight was really just a way for Jotaro to pass the torch on to the next generation. It was a way to make Josuke grow.
King Crimson is the stand of all stands. Not really, but it's one of the most important stands in JoJo's Bizarre Adventure because it's the stand of the main villain of JoJo's Bizarre Adventures Part 5, Vento Oreo, and one of the most interesting stands, better say the least, because it has a power which confuses a lot of people. It confuses a lot of people to a point when it doesn't need to a point when it's forced, to a point when people literally consider King Crimson a plot hole, when it's one of the best written stands in JoJo. Let me explain what I mean. In the old JoJo's Bizarre Adventures scans, King Crimson was confusing enough to a point when people went with the meme. It just works. This meme plays along with JoJo's Bizarre Adventures perfectly because it represents a just work theme that Araki forgets stuff or whatever. But whatever you wanna say, let me just say this. King Crimson is actually really easy to understand. You can literally think of King Crimson like the world. That's it. Sure, it's kinda more complex than that, but that's what you need to know. Now let me explain how this became one of the most confusing things. It never didn't. It's just an unfunny meme. Why even I'm debunking this? Because people actually consider this a plot hole. OMG, SMH, KYC. Just for the sake of it, I'm gonna explain King Crimson right now. It will take me like 10 seconds. Here we go.
Now we are gonna do a little jump to part 8. Did Araki forget about what seemed like the most established plot point in the part? The Wall Eyes, who took a key role in early part 8, granting stand abilities and causing mysterious bite marks to appear on people near them, as well as fusing stuff for no apparent reason, seem to just have been forgotten. They haven't been mentioned for quite a while now, even though they used to have a key role in JoJolion, and some people claim that Araki has just dropped this major plot point. But you gotta remember, JoJolion lays a big focus on mystery. It set up a bunch of mysteries throughout the part, a lot of which have already been solved, and it would only make sense for the Wall Eyes to be brought up again near the climax. Remember, part 8 is not over yet, and it would only make sense for a major plot point as important as this one to be featured near the end again. Would be a bit anticlimactic if he just dropped everything at us in the middle of JoJolion's runtime, wouldn't it? In fact, we already have received a bunch of clues to explain the plot points, some of which reach as far back as Steel Ball Run. Most of it is just theorizing though, but no one knows what Araki has planned for the future, and we shouldn't just jump at his throat, since part 8 isn't even over yet.
Okay, thank you for watching this video, it means a lot to me. Also thank you to Alt-Narancia for taking part on this video. I just wanted to clear some misconceptions that I see all the day on Twitter, all the day on YouTube. Just chill, dude. Give Araki a break. He's giving you one of the greatest works you probably ever will read, one of the greatest manga of all time, and you take it for granted and call him forgetful? Get off my timeline. Right now, get off. Anyways, I love you guys. You guys are more intellectual than that, right? I hope so. Have a nice rest of the day. Subscribe to Alt-Narancia in the description below. Adinplore signing out.